So over COVID and during the last January election, we collected quite a number of memes. So that's one of our new collections in Legal Deposit.
Hi, I'm Shabir and you're watching the Library Report, a series where we explore our libraries and beyond, unearthing remarkable stories, hidden gems, and meeting extraordinary people. In this episode, we meet a librarian who safeguards and oversees the published heritage of Singapore, the Legal Deposit. We find out what goes on behind the scenes for this very important role.
Hi, my name is Xiang Qing and I'm a librarian overseeing the Legal Deposit collection at the National Library Board. I'm here to answer some of the questions you might have, so let's jump in. What is the Legal Deposit? So the Legal Deposit is a statutory function of the National Library that allows the library to collect and preserve all works published in Singapore as part of Singapore's published heritage. Under the National Library Board Act, all publishers are supposed to submit 2 copies of their work to Legal Deposit. We also collect digital materials, so 1 copy of the digital publication should also be submitted to LD. In the National Library, we refer to materials submitted under Legal Deposit as Publication SG. Why is the Legal Deposit important? Legal Deposit is important because it is a repository of Singapore's published heritage. Over the years, we've been fortunate to have the support of the local publishing and writing community so that we've built up a collection of over 1.4 million items in the Legal Deposit collection. What are the types of items that can be found in the collection? In terms of the publication types that we collect, we have the usual materials you expect like books, newspapers and magazines, but also perhaps less commonly expected ones such as brochures, leaflets, posters, catalogues, commemorative publications like school yearbooks. So an example that I have here is the yearbook from Temasek Junior College. So TJC is actually one of the earliest JCs founded in Singapore, and this is the very first yearbook that they published for the 1977 to 78 batch. And inside the yearbook, you can see the very first batch of students, teachers, and some of the pictures of the early days of how the school looked like. Personally, what collection stuck out to you the most? For me, some of the more striking examples that I've seen in the Legal Deposit collection would be old assessment and exercise books. So I have a few examples here with me. These are geography assessment books from the 1940s and 1960s. So I remember doing assessment books when I was in primary school, secondary school. So I was quite interested to see how far these go back to the 40s and 60s. So for example, this one, it reminded me of the 10-year series that I was working on. Then another book that struck me was this everyday Hokkien conversation that was published, I think, in the 70s or 80s. I didn't think I'd see one that taught you how to speak Hokkien. They actually tried to teach you Hokkien through phonetics, which I thought was quite difficult because then you'd have to know how the different tones sounded. And looking through the content page, you see different scenarios for the conversations, so I thought this was quite interesting. What does your typical workday look like? I don't think there's really a typical workday for me. Probably the only typical thing that I do every day is checking my inbox for emails. It could be inquiries from publishers asking about processes for submitting items for Legal Deposit. There are also organizations or individuals who offer to donate items to us sometimes, and we review their suitability for Legal Deposit or other collections in the National Library. From time to time, you'll also get requests for Legal Deposit items for display purposes. So we'll work with the internal departments to retrieve the items and also to assess the condition of the items and their suitability for display. What is the oldest item in Legal Deposit? The oldest item we have is the program booklet for the ceremony of laying the foundation stone at the Clyde Terrace Market. And it's published by the Straits Times Press in 1873, and it's actually a legacy from the Raffles Library. So this program booklet was a program for the ceremony and included ceremonial details and a speech given at the ceremony, as well as a layout of where all the individuals would position. Are there materials in the legal deposit that chart Singapore's growth as a nation? Over the years, Singapore has played host to quite a number of events, and we do have posters in the legal deposit collection that showcase these events. For example, for sporting events, in 1973, Singapore was host to the Siap Games, that's the Southeast Asian Peninsular Games, which later became the SEA Games. So that was significant because it's the first time that the Siap Games was held in Singapore. And then fast forward to 2010, Singapore was the host for the Youth Olympic Games, and that was also significant because that was in fact the inaugural Youth Olympic Games. So we had young athletes coming from all over the world to take part in the Games in Singapore. Then moving away from the world of sports to finance, in 2006, Singapore played host to the 61st annual meeting of the International Monetary Fund and World Bank Boards of Governors, and that was also quite a milestone for Singapore because up until that point, it was the largest world event that Singapore had played host to, and there were 20,000 delegates from over 180 countries, so that was a very high-profile event for Singapore. Does the legal deposit contain first edition publications? Yes, we do have in our collection a number of first editions of serial publications. So an example is Her World, which still exists today but was actually first published in July of 1960. And for the first issue, it would just cost 60 cents. And in addition to the usual articles that you might find in such magazines about beauty, fashion, and health, what was interesting about this issue was that it also offered what they called a free pattern service, which is that in a few of the pages you find patterns for dresses that you could copy outside and then use to make your own dresses. This is a publication from the Singapore Armed Forces called National Pioneer, and this was launched on National Day, August 9th, 1969. It's had a change of name. It later became known as just Pioneer. So this magazine stopped its print edition in 2019, but it now still exists as a website with social media channels and an email newsletter. And over here we have what might be more familiar to more Singaporeans. So this is the first issue of Radio and TV Times, and if this logo looks familiar to some of you, it's because it's the logo of Singapore Broadcasting Corporation, and this is the first issue published on the 25th of October 1980. If this doesn't sound familiar to you from the younger generation, this might be more familiar because the publication later became 8 Days, and this was the very first edition of the 8 Days. Does legal deposit accept items like campaign posters? Yes, Singapore has had many campaigns over the years, so correspondingly we do have quite a large collection of campaign posters. So this is the poster of the Great Singapore World Cup in 1993. Specifically, this poster is just of the Padang event in October, but it's actually a month-long program called the National Healthy Lifestyle Program. We also have posters of the Speak Good English movement, which was launched in 2000. So the background of this movement was because there was a concern that Singaporeans were speaking too much Singlish, and we wanted to try to encourage Singaporeans to speak proper English. We also have posters on SARS, which happened in 2003. So now that we've just come out of COVID, it's interesting to look back at these posters and observe that there are actually similarities in the messaging to the public. Like, for example, check your temperature, go see a doctor, don't self-medicate, and wash your hands with soap and water regularly. What are the most nostalgic items in the legal deposit? I think we have a lot of items that will be nostalgic to different people for different reasons. But here I've picked out some publications from the 60s that might be nostalgic for some. So So here I have a publication called The Army and You, an orientation handbook. And this is actually published in 1967 for the very first batch of NS men to prep them on what to expect when they enlist. So there are pages about discipline, behavior in public. Then we have the Residence Handbook, which is published by the HDB for HDB residents. So inside the handbook, there is information about services and amenities available to residents and guidelines on problems that residents may encounter. Another place that might be nostalgic for some people was Yao Han. So Yao Han as a department store doesn't exist in Singapore, but there were quite a lot of branches in the 1970s. So this was the second branch that was opened in Singapore in Katong, and the first one that was away from the city centre. So there are some messages from the management of Yao Han, and also some pages giving a description of what they might expect on the different floors. What is one of the newest collections in legal deposit? So we have items continually submitted to legal deposit, but I would say one of the more recent highlights that we have is our meme collection. So memes are images with funny text that are sort of like commentary or reactions to current events. So over COVID and during the last general election, we collected quite a number of memes. So that's one of our new collections in legal deposit. How do I gain access to items in legal deposit? So there are physical items and digital items in legal deposit. For the physical items, you can look up the items in the NLB catalogue and click on the reservation button. There is an online form to fill up, and when the item is ready for viewing, they can be viewed on level 8 of the Lee Kong Chian Reference Library. For digital items, they can be viewed on level 11 of the Lee Kong Chian Reference Library. And for items whose access have been granted by the publishers, they can be viewed online on the Publication SG website. How do I make a deposit? So publishers will need to fill up an online form on the deposit portal. For physical publications, they can send it to the Legal Deposit Office or to any of the public library book drops. For digital items, they can just submit it online via the deposit portal. And if you need more information, you can find it on the deposit portal FAQ page. And that's all the questions that we have for today. If you enjoyed this episode of the Library Report, do give it a like and comment down below on other roles at NLB you would like to see next time. Do subscribe to the channel and click on the notification bell to get notified the next time we upload a new video. Bye!